implemented but didn't pull through.
We don't have the national examination that the student, they are happy.
In this particular case, the public have to inform the authorities.
Don't blame these youngsters. They're teenagers.
Yeah.
Hello everyone, welcome back to Beyond the Headlines. My name is Amalina Kamal, your host for this latest round of Information Digest.
And I'm Hazween, Hassan. The Education Ministry has rolled out an ambitious strategic education plan, or PSKPM, for 2024 till 2030. It's an exciting roadmap aimed at reshaping our national education system with a focus on improving access, quality, and digitalization over the next 7 years.
Absolutely, Hazween. And while the plan sounds promising, there are some big concerns that we need to address first. For example, bridging the digital divide between urban and rural areas. How are our teachers being equipped here, especially when it comes to their skill sets, as well as whether or not they have tools to upskill and educate the students?
That's right. Let's not also forget about the infrastructure too. Rural schools often face outdated facilities, so we're curious to know if upgrades are planned and how they will be executed. Plus, there are two committees set to monitor the implementation of this plan. But what does it truly take to ensure everything remains on track?
Right. There's certainly a lot to unpack here, and even with a hot topic that recently resurfaced, the issue on whether or not we should have examinations back again. Now, a lot of educators, as well as certain parents, I believe, are questioning whether or not the removal of UPSR and PT3 having to leave a gap in the traditional academic milestones. And for this particular discussion, we would like to invite our guest that's here on set, Professor Dr. Ramlee Mustapha, Educationist from UPSI. Welcome, Professor, to Beyond the Headlines.
Thank you very much for having me today.
Professor, of course, let's start the discourse first with what was introduced by the ministry. The, strategic education plan, PSKPM here, it spans across 2024 up until 2030. Now that's 7 years, and that's well over 2 terms when we talk about governance here. Thoughts on it first, especially in terms of how can we make sure that it's sustainable?
Okay, thank you very much, Amalina and Hazween. Basically, the plan that has been introduced by the Ministry of Education was to replace the blueprint that will end in 2025. So I think this new blueprint, even though I have not read the full report, but basically have around five elements. Then one of them is about the first one is about quality education, and also the access. Of course, these are not new issues. So the access has been in different blueprint previously about how to give a full education to all Malaysians. So, but we still have these minority groups in remote area, B40, or indigenous people, indigenous children, or street students who are not in the school system. So they are the ones that we maybe the government should focus so that they can be full, especially in the primary school, full enrollment.
How can we ensure that the people who are left behind, the societies or students that are left behind, to be up to speed at least? What were previously implemented but didn't pull through, especially when we factor in COVID, right? So a lot of people had their learning from home, and then not everybody had access to internet. What should be addressed first?
A good question. I believe that we still have the digital divide in Malaysia, because last time when COVID happens, there are some students, university students who climb the tree and to get the access of the internet. So this is in remote areas, but the government promised that 5G internet will be, covering all these areas. So my concern maybe not even 5G, maybe 4G is not really fully accessed, especially in the remote areas. So the government have to convince the people that they have this infrastructure, internet highway that is accessible to all locations. I went and researched of the several Orang Asli schools in the remote area, and I find that they have still behind in the infrastructure. And some of the school actually doesn't have the electricity full day. Maybe they have some hours of the day they have by generating generators, which depend on the diesel. Sometimes when the times when it's difficult to bring the diesel to the remote areas, then they don't have the electricity. So these are the issues that we need to solve in order to have the quality. The first one in the strategic plan is the quality and access of the education.
Don't you think that what you've just said that means that we still have so many challenges that we're dealing with this digital divide? So don't you think that we are actually jumping ahead of ourselves, or the government is jumping ahead of itself, perhaps overestimating its capabilities, when I think the number one issue here, address the rural, the situation in the rural areas first before even thinking of the digitalization of the education system?
Yes. I think the government should go down to the rural areas to see, because when I went to the Orang Asli villages and so on, sometimes we can compare. This one instance, maybe just one instance, that there's two settlement, one in the Felda and the other one in Orang Asli settlement. So I went to the Felda and we can see all the electricity access. When I went to the next Kampung Orang Asli, there is no electricity. They depend on the solar, but the solar is not well maintained. So we can see this imbalance in terms of the treatment. And with me, there are some researchers from Japan, and they asked me, why in this Felda we have electricity, but in Orang Asli villages, no electricity. So that's the question that difficult for me to answer, because we're supposed to provide all the infrastructure equally to all sections of the community, including those indigenous people.
Right. So especially when we talk about the lack of service that they have or accessibility that they have, they can't even ensure that the curriculum is up to par, right? So what should the government at least do to kind of help assist the Orang Asli community first, before simplifying them as having the same access as the Felda village or settlements that you just mentioned?
There's a big challenge actually, because the government have to cater everybody. One infrastructure, maybe a problem is the road to access to the settlements. The second thing, maybe the electricity and the water. So we have all the policies regarding the clean water to indigenous people and electricity, but I think it's not fully achievable due to several factors. But after more than 60 years of independence, I think we have to think about settling this problem, especially for indigenous people, and to provide them with equal standards of facilities. The school in indigenous villages, of course, they have a primary school.
And they don't necessarily have a setup or a plan. I mean, I suppose the infrastructure as our SKs, right? Our Sekolah Kebangsaan. They don't have that sort of built up, right?
They have the Sekolah Kebangsaan usually in their settlement.
Okay.
But for the Sekolah Menengah, for the secondary, they have to go out from their settlement, because there is very few Sekolah Menengah secondary school in the settlement.
And on average, how far do they have to travel to get to school?
It depends on the location. Maybe some remote area, they have to maybe travel several miles or kilometers, and they have the transportation by the Jakwa. But still, when they go back to their homes, maybe the problem with electricity, problem with the housing. Maybe housing is quite small, and of course in the house, maybe there is no lack of facilities. For example, table, they have, sometimes I see they just sit on the floor to do their assignments. So this thing I
It's
think because of the
concerning, yes.
income of the parents are very low, so they have the problem.
Right.
But for the school, I think we have to cater, the Ministry of Education has to cater the school, make sure they have the internet, they have the electricity, they have the facilities that is equally with the other school in the urban areas.
Okay, Prof. Before we go into the question of PSKPM back again and then having these two committees established under them, I want to ask you this: during your observation when you were in the Orang Asli villages,
Yes.
what were the teachers, or at least how did they engage with students then?
Yes, most of the teachers are the Malay teachers. Very few are the Orang Asli teachers. So that's another issue of the teacher training. I think we have one IPG which is train Orang Asli teachers, which is in Kuala Lipis, Institute of Perguruan Pendidikan Guru Ampuan,
Right.
in Kuala Lipis. There are some students who are trained to be teachers. Of course, we are expected these teachers to be sent to their settlements in order that they can communicate in their own language. Maybe they have the role model.
Right.
The teacher become the role model. But the problem with the Malay teachers or the non-Asli teachers, they might have a different cultural paradigm. For example, Orang Asli, they usually have this adat, Adat, maybe if someone die in their house, they cannot go out for 3 days. So they're absent from the school. So maybe when they come back, they will be scolded by the teachers. But the teachers doesn't understand maybe on the cultural paradigm of this Orang Asli. Second thing, the Orang Asli parents usually never scolded their children. So, and when they get scolded by teachers, they run away from the school. And if it's a case that they run back to their houses using the nearby river. So some of them are drowned.
So they play truant, they miss school, and it has a psychological effect, obviously, because they're not used to getting told off, and also that cultural barrier adds to the problem, doesn't it?
Yeah, if their houses are far from the school, some of them are put in the hostel or dormitory in the school, but as young as standard 1, so they are away from their parents. So some of them are not used, and they usually are following their schoolmates, which is also Orang Asli. So they clock together. Even I have I heard the teacher says that even the student is good, smart, but if you put one student in the A class, I mean the smart class, and the rest in the C class. So the smart class, one student will go back to the C class because he or she wants to be with their groups.
Right.
Obviously,
Yeah, they want to be in a learning environment that's building and not just alone, isolated in that sense. Okay, let's go into then these two committees that were established under this particular plan, like to ensure that there is some sort of sustainability.
Yes.
How do you foresee them working together? Don't we already have something of sorts like this in other plans?
It is quite normal to have two committees. One is the main one, which we call the Indo. Indo is just concerned about the policies, and the other committee is usually about daily operations of the policies or the implementation of the policies. But what concerns me is the communication between the two committees, because sometimes you have different people in the upper committees and the different people for the lower committees. So that if the communication is good, then it could be positive strategies in order to implement the PSKPM.
I mean, ideally, it should be a two-way communication channel, shouldn't it?
Yes.
Or is there a problem that you're concerned
yes. I'm in the Majlis TVET Negara. We also have two. One, the Indo one, chaired by the Deputy Prime Minister, and the second one is more operational types, because we, the Indo, may be concerned about the policies, the main agenda, and whatever we decide on the main agenda will be implemented by the second committees. So that's a normal process, but the most important is the communication between the two. Yeah, as you said.
You know, before we can talk about the sort of quality of our students or the
Yes.
type of our students, right? Let's talk about how we gauge our students, how we assess our students. So recently there was news of whether or not the ministry should bring back examinations, and it's in the form of either UPSR and PT3. Your thoughts first, Prof.
Okay, there's a pro and cons about this issue, and I have been researching for different countries' model. Of course, the closest one is Singapore, and I read about the Minister of the Education, Minister of Education in Singapore. There's a movement in Singapore to abolish the primary school leaving examination. It's like UPSR at grade 6 or from year 6. They have this big examination at the primary school, similar with our situation. We have UPSR at the year 6, and there's a movement to abolish as we have abolished, but the Singapore ministry reject the abolishment. I read the minister comments did not abolish the PSLE, primary school leaving examination in Singapore, and the ministry say, yeah, the PSLE is not perfect. It's not like crave on the stone, in the stone. But she say it's a useful checkout, useful instruments to check whether our classroom-based assessment is working. Because as an assessment expert, we usually say that we cannot depend on one methods.
Yep.
So my perception, or my belief, that we need two set of assessment. One is the classroom-based assessment, and the other is a national assessment, so that it will complement. And the other thing that maybe some parents say, oh, it was stressful to the students. If we don't have the centralized assessment, it will not match with our system, because our system is very centralized. We have centralized curriculum at the secondary, primary school. So the most appropriate, according to the knowledge of education, is the centralized assessment, one of them. Because, and the assessment, national assessment is not every year. For primary, only one in 6 years. So every year you have the classroom assessment, it's okay, go on. But at one time, we need the national assessment, because classroom assessment is based on teacher-made assessment.
Yes.
So teacher made the assessment, teacher made the exam, and teacher is scoring. So that's some sort of bias in that sense. But we need an independent type of class, national.
Do you think that in hindsight, we should have never abolished the exams in the first place?
Yes.
And also, as an oversight to all of this, is it also, like you said, there might be biases with school-based assessments,
Yes.
because it's the teacher doing everything. So do you think that this is also an indication that it's failed? The school-based assessments?
Yes, I think it's one of the weaknesses, because if you want to reform the assessment system at that scale, the large scale, because these two national assessments are very big and it's been going for decades, but you want to make a decision on abolishing it, you have to get all the stakeholders to agree on that one. And the other point that I think, this is my own hypothesis,
Right.
that the PISA results was rock bottom, I think, because of the abolishment of the UPSR and PT3. Because PT3, examination is closely tailored to the PISA assessment.
But what would you say about some of those who still sort of argue the PISA standings don't actually reflect our true performance in education?
Literacy level in that sense.
Saying,
as well.
I mean, in a way, they're justifying, oh, it's okay, PISA scores don't really matter that much. What do you have to say about that?
If it don't matter, why we enter it? So it's like Olympic. If you didn't get the medal, then you say it's something wrong with that system. But I think is a critical instrument, PISA, because it's compare many countries. So So if you want to be prepared for PISA, it's not just taking the exam. You have to several years to prepare for that. So that's why I think the UPSR and PT3 is the the effective preparation for the student to face the PISA.
Right. I mean, sometime last week, our Deputy Prime Minister, Datuk Sri Zahid Hamidi, did say that discussions with the Education and Higher Education Ministry had previously found out that writing, reading, as well as counting is an issue, especially among our students. And we've actually also talked about this in previous episodes.
Yes.
First, how can we cultivate the the need to learn, or the likeness to learn and read, and having to exchange our reading materials with one another?
Thank you. That's a very good point. I also agree with some of those who agree with the abolishment of the PT3 and UPSR, and they say, oh, we want fun learning, and then we don't want to stress the students. But I say we have to know our culture, because some countries like Finland, United States, even though they don't have this national examination at the primary and secondary school, but they have the culture of reading. From the young, the mother, the father will read for the student and their children, and the children have this culture of reading. Most of us are not reading to our children. Everybody busy, parent busy, and so on. And when there is
or glued to the screen.
Yeah.
Not too sure why.
Yes, and that we don't have the national examination. That the student, they are happy because there is no pressure for them to study. But the problem is they are wasting a lot of time. For example, my son, when coming back from, school, he didn't open the book. He opened his handphone, play the games and so on. So there is no pressure. And that's why I think one of the problem, maybe one of the factors, that 10,000 who registered for SPM didn't go to SPM because they say, oh, we don't have this PT3, we don't have a big examination. All of a sudden, we have to face SPM. So maybe, I don't have the evidence, but maybe they are afraid to face SPM because they have not gone to face other smaller, national examination.
I don't blame these youngsters, these teenagers. They're teenagers.
Yes.
If you've taken away that expectation of having to
study
for exams and prepare for it, then obviously they're going to play it down.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
But how do we still keep them motivated? How do we still tell them that education is key to your future, to the future that you want or you desire, right?
That's all based on the icon that they are following, because nowadays there's a lot of influencers say, I don't have to go to university, I can make a lot of money by creating contents and a lot of followers. So they think that, and the gig economies, they want the money fast. They say, I don't have to go to university, I just deliver something and then I got money. So these two factors, like influencer and the gig economies, influence our generation, young generation, to say that no need to go university, no need to study, long time. But they have not maybe aware that these gig economies maybe do not have the safety net. You have no saving, you don't have the EPF and so on.
So the HR ministry or the Labour Department needs to work together in fixing this sort of climate that has been created over time.
They have
right?
a plan to create like EPF, SOCSO for the gig economy. That is a good move.
One step.
Yeah,
That's
one
good,
step.
yeah.
But in the future, like the Deputy Prime Minister say, we are lacking of 30,000 of the skilled workers, the engineers that we need. When the investors coming, and we need these engineers. So of course, if you want to be engineers, you have to have the SPM. You have to go to university. It's not just you have this. But the other alternative that we discussed in the Majlis TVET Negara is that we want to make equivalent SPM with the SKM. SKM is the Skill Kemahiran Malaysia. So even though you don't have SPM, but you can also go to study by your SKM. So we try to make accessible for everybody. You don't have SPM, it's okay. Then you go to the skill-based training. But that's different paradigms. So you one track is to go to university, become professional. The other tracks also you can be professional, but by skill-based training.
Right. But before we reach SPM or SKPM itself, like, do you think we should introduce a more rigorous sort of assessment?
Classroom assessment, you cannot compare. For example, one A student in Guomosang, which is very remote, and A student in Putrajaya is not the same.
Obviously,
It's not the same. But if you have the UPSR or PT3 or SPM, is regardless of the location, is the same. So that's a disadvantage of the classroom assessment, that you are criterion based, not a norm reference based. Yeah.
Right. I suppose one thing we should learn from all of this, from all this sort of switching back and forth, from centralized exam-based to school-based, now back to exams, is that we're not all made the same. Like like every other individual on this planet, we all have different sides to us. We have we're gifted differently, we think differently, and I guess in a way we have to compensate. We have to accommodate those differences.
That's the first principle of assessment. First principle of assessment, if you are studying education, is never depend on one type of assessment.
Right.
That's why I agree that we need also, beside classroom assessment, we need a national examination.
Yep.
If those who say that we are free, examination free society, I think they are utopian. Utopian meaning that they are dreaming.
Right.
Because I say, if your argument is to abolish all, why you still have SPM?
That's true. That is true.
Okay.
And lastly, I think we're finally wrapping up our segment here with you on AI. So obviously, with the digitalization of our education system, this is going to be a bit hot topic, right? AI offers promising tools for enhancing education. It can help us in so many ways, but it also poses a challenge in moving away from more traditional exam-based systems. So how can teachers then make use and leverage AI to assess their students beyond standard testing?
Okay, I think in the future, maybe Malaysia will be one of the hub of AI. As we are, previously said that Malaysia will be a hub for the foreign student to study in here.
And we are going to build our AI sort of like institution, right? Our first AI institution.
The government has identified one or two university as AI, some polytechnics of, premium, maybe AI based. So my model for TVET, I call it TVET AI, meaning that we also need to expose to the students AI in using augmented reality, virtual reality in order for training. Right. Because AI will reduce all the waste. For example, if you have welding and you use the normal welding, it's use a lot of metals, and wasted. But if you, in the initial training, you use AI, it seems like a real training. They can feel how they, do the welding, but without any wastage. But of course, in the final year, they need to go to the real physical. But you can reduce the amount of the machine that you want to buy, because the initial, they going to use AI, and the final year, they use the physical one. Okay?
Prof, earlier on, you did mention about how we're lacking regulators, right? Is this something that you found out being a member of TVET, of the TVET Council?
Yeah.
Can you explain that?
That's my my suggestion to the MTVET regarding the quality monitoring of the TVET programs, because we have 13 ministry who have TVET programs, and we have 1,350 TVET training institution, including the private and public sectors. So in order to monitor all this, because everybody are doing their own things, for me, I believe that we need a regulator to regulate the quality, because some of the institutions may not achieve the minimum quality requirement. If we have the regulator say, we close that down, because they don't fulfill the basic criteria. For example, the equipment, the instructors, whether the instructors have the industrial experience or not, the qualification, and so on. So I think regulators is very important in order to regulate the quality of the TVET institution in Malaysia.
What are the implications if this is not addressed immediately, or are we already seeing it? And is it detrimental to the industries of concern here?
That's a good question, because if there is no regulator, then the maybe ministry will have duplication. The programs will be duplicated, and maybe several ministry doing the same thing, and then there is no student, lack of student, because student will go and study in too many training institutions. So we need to make sure each institution is of quality, and they have the infrastructure, they have the equipment that at par with the industry.
Right.
So another way is also to have a partnership with the industry that we are doing now. Yep.
Right. Unfortunately, this is the end of this particular segment. Now, of course, this discussion is an open one. It's only because we want to bridge the gap between teachers, students, as well as the administrators at play here, right? Because at the end of the day, it is for quality education, and it is for whatever plans we present, right, to be realized, the goals to be realized. Now, again, I would like to thank Professor Dr. Ramlee Mustapha for being on set. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Amalina and Hazween.
Thank you. It's such a pleasure to have
to
you with us
have
today.
you here too.
And to our audience, stay tuned for our second segment. We'll be back. Welcome back to the show. Now let's shift our focus to a more serious issue: deviant groups, their teachings, and whether they pose significant threat to our security, national security, that is. Now, I'm sure everyone right about now already has been up to date with the developments surrounding GISB holdings. They are under investigations on multiple accusations already, and one of which having been labeled as a continuation of Al-Arqam ideology.
Yes, Amalina, that's right. Last Friday, the Perlis Fatwa Committee declared that the beliefs and teachings of GISB holdings are deviant and un-Islamic. It makes Perlis the first state to declare the organization as a deviant group. Perlis Mufti Datuk Dr. Muhammad Asri Zainul Abidin, also commonly known as Dr. Maza, says that the fatwa was issued after the committee received compelling evidence. He says that the batiniah, or esoteric elements in GISBH's teachings, are a continuation of the deviant Al-Arqam teachings. The committee concluded that GISBH fosters a cult-like reverence for its leaders, equating them with the Prophet Muhammad and attributing divine-like knowledge to them. This, he added, leads to extreme fanaticism where followers obey leaders even when their actions contradict the Quran and Sunnah. And to add to that, just on Wednesday, the Selangor Islamic Religious Council, or MAIS, ordered 8 schools linked to GISBH to close. These schools are registered as private Islamic schools under the Islamic Schools Control Enactment 1988, or EPSI. The Selangor Islamic Religious Department, or JAIS, had found that these schools violated the provisions under the EPSI law. These schools include a Mahad Tafiz in Sepang, a primary school, Islam Miftahul Hikmah in Klang, a secondary school, Global Ikhwan or Banat in Rawang, another secondary school, Sekolah Menengah Islam Zadut Taqwa 2 in Puchong, another secondary school in Shah Alam, Sekolah Rendah Islam Yakatufat in Rawang, and another primary school in Rawang, as well as Sepang. Yeah.
And while the ISB itself operates under the guise of business and religious fronts, its influence is very worrying, and hence that's why you see the crackdown happening, especially with Op Global. The questions here still remains, right, Hazween, on how much of a threat do they pose to Malaysia's national security, and what measures are we hoping to expect in this latest development, right? And for this, we have an interview with a security and counter-terrorism expert, Dr. Ahmad El Muhammady.
Doctor, again, thank you so much for being on this video call with me. First, of all, let's just immediately address and try to calm the situation, or at least let our audience understand the potential security risks here, especially when they are associated with cult-like influences, as we can see with GISB.
Yes, regarding the security risk, I think by now our authorities has understood that the nature, the existence of the group itself is not only involved in the deviant teaching, I would say, based on the discovery or investigation that the police has done, and the discovery that they made based on the material they confiscated. I look at it and I was very, very familiar with the book. It's not very, very old. It belongs to the occult group, if I may say, because they have certain fanaticism element in terms of the fanatics to ideology, fanatics to leadership, their leaders, and the fanatic to the groups. And, this kind of thinking, this kind of practices, it is very, very dangerous, because usually this kind of group, they require their members to take the pledge of allegiance. They call it bay'ah, meaning that I pledge the allegiance to the group, to the leader. And there are consequences if you leave the group, whether it is physical or spiritual, but there are consequences. Whenever the group feel threatened with a certain thing that the government has taken, for example, the police has taken, usually they're gonna get aggressive. But in this case, I think they respect the rule of law, they respect the authorities.
You had experience working with EA very closely in having to rehabilitate people who are, radicalized really hard. And in that situation, what is the approach? What is it more intrusive in having to correct their worldview?
There is some similarities that we can find between deviant teaching and also the terrorist inmates, or those people who are charged under terrorism law when it comes to rehabilitation. But there are also differences. Now let us talk about something similar. Something similar is we're talking about the assessment, I believe. Number one is the assessment. As I said, there are 3 stages of assessment. We have to diagnose what is the problem, meaning that we have to find out what they believe. We apply this principle to both. We try to find out what they believe in the case of ISIS followers, for example. In the case of deviant teaching, we also try to find out what they believe. And we have to find out really what they believe, what books that they have read, and what kind of teaching that they practice, and what are their state of mind, the state of emotion, how about the grievances, the family background, the education, and so on and so forth. We try to find out about this. Now, the second part is we try to analyze it and try to find out, like, is there any deviation in this kind of understanding, in this kind of teaching? This is, again, is something similar. We try to find the same thing. But I suspect that the difference would be when it comes to the level of commitment to violence. In particular case, in JISB, I don't think they are prone to violence. They don't prone to violence. They just have certain narrative, certain doctrine, certain ideology. As compared with certain, I'm not saying all of them, but certain terrorist inmate, for example, or those people who charge on terrorism law, they have tendency to embrace violence as a means to achieve their goals. But in the context of the deviant teaching, they don't use it. At least for now, at least for the time being, we don't see any indicators showing that they're inclined towards using violence as a mean. I think if they're involved in that, by now they are being charged under terrorism law. So that is the difference. When it comes to the commitment to violence, I don't think we have it. So therefore, the approach is different and the module would be different. We need to develop a special module addressing their belief system. For example, Mahdism usually constitute one of the most important doctrine in deviant teaching. They believe in the arrival of Mahdi at the end of the times. And those Mahdi is maybe coming from their group, or they are representing by their leaders, for example. So that's completely different from the individuals who are detained under terrorism law, because they don't have this kind of Mahdism as the main character or main doctrine in their teaching. So I think this is the similarity and differences that we can find between these two.
You would say that this current situation is pretty mild, because the level of radicalism is not necessarily, how do I say, being blown out of proportion in that sense. But surely on social media, I'm not too sure if you realize on TikTok, we've got like a certain sort of like army on there trying to rationalize it through a manner that the investigations and the crackdown against, you know, the Ikhwan group, the global Ikhwan group, is like an attack on the Muslim society, because they have incorporated or related back to, you know, this is the only business that actually is from end to end Muslim owned.
There are two sides of the issue that we can look at it here right now. One is on the business side of the organization, and the second one on the ideological side, or the practice side of that organization, which is actually non-business. So on the business side, yes, we understand one thing. There are industries, what they call affairs, and they may have certain things to look into. They have what they call proper procedures, certain laws that they're going to use to investigate things related to business practices. We understand that. The second part is the serious, legitimate ideological threats to the society. So that is another dimension to that. So I think that our authorities, they understand both sides of the problem. There are business side involved, and there are also ideological side involved. And I think as the authorities, we have to take action, regardless of whether there is a business involved, there's certain people involved, certain organization or certain group of people involved. It doesn't matter. What matters most is we have to make sure that the public order is maintained. That is what the most important thing. So even though it is involved business, maybe it's involved certain Muslim business, for example, in this particular case, yes, we acknowledge that it's going to affect their business. It's going to affect the Muslims' industries and ecosystem in that context. But certain action need to be taken, because if we don't do that, that is going to allow this organization to continue to operate, and we're not going to solve the problem.
But is public order maintained though? So with that, right, I would like to follow up with the question on, you know, the role of social media here, because again, I mentioned about TikTok, right? How can the authorities better monitor activities without infringing, you know, the digital freedom here, the right to speak here? How can they better monitor misinformation?
Well, I think this is a very challenging things to do. You know, in one hand, we have to respect the freedom of expression that the public have, right? Here in Malaysia, we have the freedom of expression, we have civil rights, political rights. It gives people to say things. Maybe it is against what the position of the government, but at the same time, we also need to balance with the national security and public order. So I think the middle way would be, whenever we have this kind of video, we have to respond. Certain people need to respond. The authorities need to respond. What are the actual things that happen, so that we can correct the fact? Because I would say the person who make that kind of statement is just only one opinion based on his own understanding, his own limitation. Therefore, he say what he says. But I think as the authority, they need to do more. And those people who in charge of the monitoring cyberspace, for example, need to do more when it comes to this kind of things, because it's involved religion, it's involved also about race, and these are the two combustible issues in this country.
Right. And when it comes to authority, especially when to remove such contents, right? So today, September 25th, our communications minister actually said that MCMC will only remove GISB related content upon police instruction. Do you agree with this? Like, do you agree when there's an instruction, then MCMC should step in? What's the use of such body of authority then? Because if it's already deemed destructive, why can't they act upon it immediately?
I believe that the minister is talking based on the procedural aspect of the issue. They can, I think MCMC can do whatever he want. I mean, if they wanted to do it, they can remove anything because they have the tools, they have the technical know-how to do it. But there are certain procedures, I think, that involve before we take certain action. This is what we talk about the rule of law here. I mean that you can't just say, hey, guys, I don't like this thing. I want you to remove it. Must have certain valid. And those people who can give that kind of instruction is from the legal side, that is the police. I think that's what the minister was saying. But I think for the public in this particular case, the public have to inform the authorities. I mean, if they discover or come across with certain videos or TikTok like this, they have to highlight that there are certain things going on in the cyberspace, in TikTok, for example, that need your attention. And I believe that the ministry, the MCMC, is very quickly look into that and waiting for the right time actually to take a proper action.
Do you think that this pressure is also, I suppose, making sure that those who have the intent to do wrong, or at least to kind of make the situation more complicated, is a bit more restrained? Basically, there's more that meets the eye in terms of what is already being said on the other divide.
I agree with you. Yes. You know, what we found in the social media, in the cyberspace, is just only a tip of an iceberg. There are a lot more things which is unsaid, I believe. And if you dig deeper, or if you have a personal conversation with people in the market, for example, in the coffee shop or on the street, you're going to find more, but they don't talk this in the public because of the attention, because of the monitoring and so on. So this is what I mean, that the public need to play their role as well. I mean, just to make sure that this thing is properly handled and properly being monitored, and public need to work together with the authorities so that we can prevent the escalation.
Got it. Can we maybe talk about the 8 schools that were instructed to close by MAIS here? So today also there's an update from the Selangor Islamic Religious Council in identifying 8 premises used by GISB. So they've registered as private Islamic schools and they were instructed to close, right? So with that, I want to understand, how should Malaysia's counter-terrorism, or at least the religious enforcement, collaborate together to prevent, similar rise in deviant teachings here? And when they use business fronts or educational fronts to spread their teachings, it certainly mars like the whole group, right? It's like one bad apple, but then you do not understand immediately thinks that other religious schools are like that.
Well, I would say in this particular case, it's involved, I would say, is a deviant teaching group. It is not involved terrorism cases. If it's involved terrorism cases, it fall under the jurisdiction of the counter-terrorism special branch. But if it is involved in deviant teaching, and I believe that based on what I observed, there are multiple agencies involved, especially religious department. Whenever we have school which involve kids, we need a special assessment being done on them. What has been the next step that we have to take? So it is quite different from the terrorism cases that are involved, or rehabilitation programs that are involved, because it's involved as the different category of offenders.
But certainly rehabilitation for those who have been affected is necessary, don't you think so? I suppose in your experience, what sort of program would fit best for those who are rescued in this context?
I'm not sure what is in the plan regarding the rehabilitation programs, but I would say, number one, it requires a specially designed modules for them. And that module must be made based on the proper evidence-based analysis and investigation. You cannot just give any medicine to any sickness. You have to make a proper diagnosis on what is the problem. And then we come up with the analysis as a second stage. And the third stage is prescription. We give you the certain type of module to address the problem. If you just give any type of rehabilitation, just like a terrorist rehabilitation in this particular case, it's not going to work because the problem is different. So that's the idea.
I understand. So it's how we see this, right? It's interesting for you to having to clearly, I suppose, define the difference between, past cases and the current case right now. So obviously the current case is more on deviant ideologies and how we can, like control this, right? But do you think more should be done to ensure that the public can maintain peace? Because as you mentioned, it might be different on a interpersonal level, but online, the conversations are very colorful in that sense, right? There's a lot of theories going around. And how does this affect national security?
I think we are talking about the strategic communication here. And I think in your particular case, for example, what you are doing here is right now is a strategic communication, which means that you invite me to a conversation and discuss about this issue with the intention of educating the public, which is very good. More should be done of this kind of conversation, especially in of the authorities. And they have to speak and clarify to the public, educate what they should do and what the public shouldn't do, and what is the status of the situation, and encouragement how the public can collaborate with the authorities in order to prevent it. I think this kind of conversation, this kind of talks, engagement need to be done more, and I hope it will be done.
Because the whole topic of discussion here is, again, about how to de-escalate radicalism. Do you think enough is being done on an education level, especially among our young, in terms of what sort of content they should consume, how they should be critical in assessing those content, and where can we improve?
I believe that one of the important things that we should teach the young people today or the generation today is the digital literacy. That's number one. How can we use social media properly? Digital literacy is very important. Somebody need to develop module on this thing to teach at whatever level, maybe in school, maybe in the universities, maybe in the public, accessible to the public, teaching them how to use social media properly and how to not being so influenced by what they see, but what they read and what they found in the cyberspace. I think that's very important. Since it is involved religious matters or religious issues in this particular case, we also need to emphasize on religious literacy, understanding of religion. I mean, the mainstream religion is not like a deviant teaching or deviant group like what we are seeing right now, or the cult. We have to educate the public also about the diversity of religion that we find here in Malaysia, for example. We call this a religious literacy. Somebody also need to develop this kind of module and to use it and to teach our people here in Malaysia about these kind of things.
Because Perlis came out with a fatwa against GISB, how do you think that impacts, I suppose, the image against them?
I believe that it is badly tarnished the image by now. And I believe that maybe they didn't anticipate this kind of things happen, but I believe Perlis has taken that decision based on their own analysis, based on their own investigation. And they concluded that it is not allowed in Perlis. This is, it is right, Perlis has the right to do so because, as I said, state has jurisdiction over religious matters, and they have taken this decision, and I think that's what happened.
And is that an example of religious literacy, or is that just scratching the surface? It has to be more than that.
I believe it has to be more than that.
Powers, basically.
I believe that it is not enough with banning. Banning is one thing because it's involved executive approach. It can use law to deal with this issue. But I believe there is another thing that we can use, which is fall under this religious literacy, that is da'wah. When people make mistake, Amalina, when people make mistake, we tell them it is a mistake, and we tell them to correct it. And we encourage for the improvement, we encourage for the improvement of himself, and we give them time and space for the personal transformation. We cannot just punish people. We cannot, because it involves people who is small, who is young. You cannot punish them forever. We have to push them for change. I think that's another thing that we have to do, instead of not only just using legal punitive approach to deal with the problem, because it's not going to go away. The time has proven, historically proven, that the executive approach, legal approach alone is not going to work. It must be supplemented, reinforced with re-education and a proper da'wah for them, so that they can change to be a better citizen of Malaysia.
Right. And obviously this is linked to, or at least this is for the deviant teachings, right? Because there are other charges against GISB that we know, which the other end of the spectrum is a little more, actually it's more destructive, or at least for GISB, because it concerns the exploitation of children and the neglect of children here.
Exactly, yeah.
All right. Thank you so much again, Doctor.
Yeah,
I appreciate your
hopefully,
time.
yes. My pleasure.
All right. Now you've heard what Dr. Ahmad El Muhammady had to say. Unfortunately, this is the end of the episode. Of course, if you like this particular episode, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Don't forget to also turn on the notification bell if you haven't already. Follow us on X, Facebook, Instagram, as well as Threads. My name is Amalina Kamal.
And I'm Hazween Hassan.
And we'll see you next week.